Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. I know it's been a while, guys. I know it's been a while. Last time you saw us, we didn't even have a Super Bowl matchup. Now we do, obviously, about a week away. We're going to get all into that big matchup, obviously about a week from Sunday. Heading into next week, obviously, we're going to do a bunch of coverage, maybe even make a big Super Bowl parlay with y'all as we get ready for the big game. But, as we get into this weekend, we're going to focus on some big college basketball matchups today and tomorrow. First, Ari, how are you doing for obviously February? We got a new month. I know a month away. We got March, my favorite month, but obviously we got a big game coming up soon. But how are we doing as we start this new month? Obviously, new month, new bankroll.
Yeah, doing great. Obviously, football's about over. One more game, but with one sport ending comes a new sport beginning. So we have baseball this month, which is exciting. Um, Obviously, we're getting right into the kind of the prime of conference play in college basketball. We'll get into later a huge slate tomorrow on Saturday, probably the biggest of the season. So we'll get into that later. Um, so yeah, a lot to look forward to. The NBA All-Star break right around the corner, trade deadline. So yeah, there's always something to look forward to in the sports world. Pretty much all year.
Yeah, like I just said, new bankroll, new month. We got some new picks as well. To go with this Friday. I'm gonna go with mine. First, I have three college basketball picks for you tonight. First, I'm going to go to the A10, one of my favorite conferences, the Atlantic 10. I'm going to take Dayton, the home wagon. I'm going to take a -7 at home against St. Bonaventure. I think it's around -120 on DraftKings right now. I love Dayton at home. Look, Dayton is one of the best teams when you look at their offensive production. It's very similar to this, and I'm not even joking. This is very similar to that 2020 team, when they had Obi Toppin and they were pretty much number one seed, obviously before circumstances that we couldn't control, COVID-19, decided to interrupt that tournament. So I really think that this Dayton team is playing some of their best basketball right now, comparable to that team back in 2020. And the way you look at it, right, they're a great 3-point shooting team, and they're obviously one of the better defensive teams inside. They get inside, but offensively, they're going to outscore you. And that's pretty much what's been, Dayton's kind of been their big number one thing, especially at home. They love to shoot the ball at home. The home differentials are insane. We look at their road splits against their home. On the road, they've had some tough losses, but at home, they beat St. URI by 34. They beat George Washington by 22 versus losing at Richmond. They played LaSalle close, only won by 12. So, in terms of the 7-point spread, I think they're just giving St. Bonaventure a little credit just because, they are a great team. The Bonnies have always been a great team out of the Atlantic 10, but Dayton at home, you can't just ignore that. The stats say it themselves. This team honestly is one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country at home. So I'm going to take Dayton -7 at home. The only reason I'm taking them, I'm confident in, is just because of the fact that they're at home. So I'm taking Dayton -7, the better offensive team back at home. So that's what I'm taking. And then going to the Big Ten, this conference, man, this conference, the Big Ten for basketball is it's something. That's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to take this over here, Ohio State and Iowa. I'm taking that over 156. I think it's about -125 on DraftKings right now. I think that this game is going to soar over. I am mostly convinced on Iowa's offense at home. And we talk about it, but since the beginning of November, Ari, we've been talking about Iowa at home for so long. This team at home is a better offensive unit. And they're playing against Ohio State, who obviously, on the road, this is not where they shine more. But the thing about Iowa is that their defense is a little bit Swiss cheese. And I think, in this case, I think Ohio State's going to be hanging in close. And I don't really like either spread. I don't like Ohio State to cover the spread, and I don't want to back Iowa at home in this case. I'm just going to take this over. This game's going to be high scoring. I'm just backing the fact that, Ohio State's going to keep this game close because of the fact that Iowa at home, even though they like to rack up the points, they don't really play that much defense. And that's kind of Iowa's mantra. They're going to outscore you no matter what. And that's with this Iowa team. So I'm just going to take this over. I'm not trusting either spread. I think it was around 6.5. And, that's a little funky to me. I don't think, Iowa is 7 points better than Ohio State and, vice versa. So I'm just going to take that over 156. I think that's the smart play there. And then we're going to the Ivy League, people. Yes, I'm telling you, invest in the Ivy League, because this league, man, I mean, they could have two bids. I'm not even kidding you. They could have two bids. I like Princeton and Yale here. I'm going to take that over 140.5. That's minus 110 on DraftKings right now. Look, I am backing the fact that Princeton, one of the best teams in terms of their offensive production, in not only in the country, but obviously in the Ivy League. They're led by, I don't want to mispronounce his name, but I think it's Xavier Lee. I just don't know how to name the star that is pretty much taken over for Princeton. We saw flashes of them last year when they obviously beat Arizona in the first round. Ari remembers, unfortunately, that game for him. But we saw the Princeton run last year, and we saw how their offense has produced, and I expect them to keep this game close against Yale on the road, because of the fact that their offense, can produce. And Yale at home, they do have a pretty good offense as well. At home, this team is a lot more high scoring, and so I'm taking the fact that you have a high scoring team coming on the road, and it's going to be a very hostile environment. Obviously, Yale, one of the better home courts in the Ivy League, going to Yale. It's a 3-point spread. I don't really like the spread that much, like the Ohio State Iowa game. I'm just going to take the over, and I think this is going to be a high scoring game. I expect Princeton's offense to show up, especially after last game where they couldn't show up on the road against Cornell. Obviously, another great team out of the Ivy League. Excuse me. So 3 teams out of the Ivy League, competing, for that single bid spot per se. But I do like this game just to go over 140.5. I think this is going to be a very high scoring game between these two Ivy League schools. So those are my 3 picks today. I'm taking Dayton on the spread at home. This Dayton home team is going to be a wagon. I like Ohio State, Iowa to go over. Like I said, I think it's just going to be a high scoring game. I don't really trust that big spread like Iowa to cover it, and same for Ohio State. I just like this game to go over. And then same for Princeton and Yale, too small of a spread. I don't really like Princeton in terms of covering that, and I don't know if Yale can. I do lean Yale if I did have to lean, just because of the fact that it is home court advantage, and I know it's going to be very prevalent, especially in these kind of smaller conferences where a lot of their fans show up in obviously smaller arenas. A lot more noise makes a lot more big factor. So I'm just going to take that over in Princeton and Yale. So those are my 3 picks. Ari, I'll stop yapping. What have you cooked up? I know you only got 1 pick, but what do you like today?
Yeah, just one NBA play, going back to my get out first half plays. Warriors, Grizzlies tonight. Warriors, they played 4 games ever since the tragic passing of their assistant coach. The 2 losses were both 1-point losses to the Kings, and then double OT against the Lakers. This is a Memphis team that Memphis beat the Warriors in Memphis. It was I think it was their last game before the coach passed away. So it was the last game before that happened. And yet still Golden's still an 8-point favorite. Guys like Kuminga's really found his groove as of late, gotten more minutes. They got Draymond back in the full swing of things. Obviously Curry. I think Clay should be playing on. I think it was the last game that he was scratched, but I think he should be back in this game. Memphis is super, super short-handed, like pretty much everywhere. They might get Derrick Rose and Kennard back. They're both questionable. But they're still super short-handed. I'm taking the Warriors just to get the job done in the first half, cover 4.5 in the first half, and get off to a big lead early. Generally, I feel like the last year they were a really, really good third quarter team, but I feel like it hasn't been as much of the case this year. So I'm just sticking with the first half into the full game. Guys, trust them more early. So Warriors first half minus 4.5 over the Grizzlies tonight.
You mentioned the fact that the Warriors used to be a really good third quarter team, and it's so true. You mentioned it last year. I mean, obviously, as a fan myself, I've seen the infamous Warriors third quarter run when Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and the rest of the team start to get hot in terms of their shooting, and that's usually been the case. But this year, it's kind of been the opposite. They usually start out pretty fire or hot in the first half, and then they kind of fizzle out in the second half. So like you're getting get out first half play as we continue those plays not only throughout the NBA but also college basketball and NFL and whatever. Just continuing the first half plays. You can find all of these plays once again on our Twitter. That is AKP Sports Talk down below. You can find both of these plays on our Twitter. Ari's play, for the Warriors first half minus 4.5, and obviously my full card Dayton minus 7.5, and then the Ohio State Iowa over, and then Princeton and Yale over. But obviously we hinted at it at the beginning of the show. the tomorrow's Saturday college basketball slate. It is so massive. We just have to talk about it. And we have some early lines right now. These are courtesy of FanDuel right now. And first, we're going to talk about the on ESPN first. The first one is between Houston and Kansas. Right now, we see Houston as a -1.5 point favorite on the road, and that's pretty generous. I'm going to say that's pretty generous right now for this Houston team, considering one, we talk about how Houston, one of the better defenses, not only in the country, and in fact, let's just say it right now. Houston has the best defense in the country, right? This team can shut you down offensively, and I think they're just giving credit right now due to the fact that this defense can travel, right? We've seen them go to major arenas, but I think this is going to be their true test. Going to Allen Fieldhouse in Kansas, they got to play Hunter Dickinson, and I don't know if they're going to have the size to neutralize him that much. But Ari, this line right now, right, about Houston -1.5, you see that -120. So the books right now, according to FanDuel, are saying that Houston potentially a slight 2-point favorite, but still pretty much a pick 'em. What do you like so far in this early line reading as you see between Houston and Kansas in tomorrow's big first game of 3 in the triple header?
Yeah, I think it's, respect to Houston because, obviously with how much home court matters, I thought Kansas would be the one that was a small favorite. Obviously, Houston, like you said, they're known for their defense, and the problem, with them is that their offense can kind of go kind of in a lull at times and kind of, can struggle in stretches. So that's always kind of been, the risk with banking on Houston. And, we haven't. It's too early for a total, potentially the under to play. I was looking at potentially here. I think if Houston's going to win, and this is generally the case with Houston, if Houston's going to win, it's going to be a lower scoring game. If Kansas is going to win, then they're going to have the faster pace. They're going to kind of control their game, with their pace and with their offense, in front of their fans, obviously at home. So I thought this might have been flipped. Kansas -1.5 is what I would have guessed. Just being at Kansas and how much home court matters. We'll see when it comes out what the total is at. Because that's if you're gonna kind of read the line, then you think Houston's gonna win this game just based off that respect. Obviously, it's still early and it could flip for all we know. By Saturday morning. So obviously it's very early. But I guess kind of the early kind of feel would be the under here over a side just based off the initial line.
Yeah, you mentioned the initial line here being with Houston as a slight favorite, and I kind of agree with you there. I feel like if the Houston wants to win this game, obviously you mentioned the under is going to be a smart play, kind of controlling this game in terms of the pace, slowing down Kansas offensively. That's going to be the game plan for Houston, I'm assuming, as they go into tomorrow's big matchup. But for Kansas, obviously you mentioned they're going to have to control the pace, and one thing we didn't really talk about is controlling the boards, with Hunter Dickinson and that size advantage. I think if the Kansas is, and now it just popped up. Look at that. So we have money line favorites right now, literally just popped up on our screen. So, and we have a total right there as well. So right now, the total right now at 134.5 with slight juice on the over. So right now I see that 134.5, and I do agree with Ari there. The smart play for us tomorrow at 134.5. As you mentioned, if Houston wants to win this game, obviously controlling the game in terms of both sides of the pace. We talk about how Houston offensively does struggle, and that's been their caveat all season, kind of like Virginia in terms of how defensively they're so strong, but offensively, if they can't shoot one night, and it's going to be one of those games where their defense is kind of struggling a little bit. I don't know how well they can do against a team like Kansas where they have multiple guys like Kevin McCullough and we've seen Johnny Furphy step up in some big time roles. We obviously know Hunter Dickinson and how huge he is for that Kansas team. So maybe the under might be a play. I kind of like Kansas as a dog at home. Just in terms of not really giving respect to, just because I feel like Houston, they've gone into some good environments, but I think obviously this is their first true Big 12 road test against the top team in Kansas, and I don't know how they're going to fare. So maybe Kansas has a slight home dog at +112 right now. 5 odds, obviously, according to FanDuel, but maybe the under might be a smart play as well. But that's obviously game 1 of the triple header tomorrow. So many games tomorrow. Obviously, the second game, the biggest rivalry in all of college basketball. And look at that. We even have a full spread. We have money line, and we have a total right there between Duke and UNC. The biggest rivalry in college basketball. But obviously, with different coaches now, it was primarily the main college rivalry because of Coach K and Roy and Coach Williams. One of the two greatest coaches in two of the greatest coaches in college basketball. With respect to John Shire and Hubert Davis, they have built some great programs this year, especially for both teams kind of leading the ACC. But those two kind of Coach K and Roy, Coach Williams, pretty much kind of, I would say, solidified that rivalry. But obviously, big game. We always talk about this big rivalry for college basketball. Right now, the live odds, obviously, this is at UNC. So UNC right now a 4.5-point favorite at home at -114. So slight juice for UNC to cover that 4.5-point spread. They're already -200 for the money line, and then the over-under set at 150.5, pretty much even pick 'em for both sides. Ari, we look at this big rivalry game between Duke and UNC tomorrow. Going to be talked about, obviously, between John Shire and Hubert Davis. We see how UNC has turned into one of the better defensive teams in the ACC as of late, and how guys like RJ Davis, Armando Bacot, Harrison Ingram have stepped up so much for this team. And Duke has been quietly kind of been doing their thing in the ACC. They've had some tough losses against a Georgia Tech, but so has UNC. So they kind of cancel it out each other. But when you see this early line for this big game tomorrow, what are you looking at, and what do you like so far?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big thing here is UNC was the hottest team in the country, and they're coming off a stunning loss to Georgia Tech by 1. But they're still one of the best teams in the country right now, despite that one loss, obviously, and then Duke as well. So, because I want to say last year, both teams weren't obviously as good as they are heading this one. So obviously, even though it's not the coaches, it's still it should still be a great game just in terms of both teams being right now top 10 teams in the country. Obviously, I mean, I feel like home court's not as big in this rivalry just because the schools are so close together that, I mean, maybe the home court gets, the first bit of tickets or whatever, so they'll have more fans, obviously. But the schools are, I think 15 minutes apart or something like that. So they're so close that I feel like it doesn't matter as much as it does in terms of, other rivalries where schools aren't, right next to each other, basically. My initial lean here was points, but like you said, the UNC defense has really stepped up at times, or for the most part this year, in a lot of matchups. I wanted to say UNC bounces back, at home off that tough loss, in their last game. I was kind of hoping the line, would be a little bit shorter, more like 2.5. Obviously, they're getting respect. UNC is, despite that loss here at home, 4.5-point favorite. So my initial lean here is UNC, just with that line respect, to cover the 4.5, just because of how big the spread is. I feel like it's a little bit bigger than what I thought it would be. But like we said, it's still early, so we'll see if it moves, one way or another.
Yeah, you mentioned home court advantage in this rivalry, and I think home court actually is really huge for this rivalry because of the fact, these two schools pack the house every single game. And the fact that it's 15 minutes away, it kind of incentivizes, UNC to pack the house because, of course, I mean, if I do remember correctly, I think Duke did get the sweep last year because obviously we talked about UNC last year. They were really struggling after they got hot to start out the season, and they kind of fizzled out. We heard about, the whole Caleb Love and RJ Davis love triangle thing that may have happened or may have not have happened. That kind of led to UNC's downfall of them going to the NIT and not participating in it. So I think I think they're giving respect to UNC in terms of their defense this year. Obviously, I do not like the fact that it is such a high spread at 4.5. I think this game, maybe, as you said, if it was at 2.5 or maybe 3.5, I would like UNC, but I do lean UNC as well at home. Like you said, home court advantage. I think this is going to be so prevalent in this rivalry. We always talk about it, and this is a big game for UNC. Obviously, they just lost that big game. They just lost at Georgia Tech, so obviously coming home, and they've lost 2 straight to Duke. So obviously this is a personal game, not only, for just the fans, not only for the players, Hubert Davis as well. So all of North Carolina. So I like UNC at home. I do lean the spread at -4.5. I just think, we talk about how UNC's defense has really hunkered down, especially in the second half. In the second half, the adjustments that Hubert Davis is, whatever he's doing in the locker room, have turned out to be really, really big, because We talk about UNC on the road. I think they just played Florida State, and they were down significantly at half, and they came out in the second half and solidified themselves and got the win on the road. And we talk, and even though they had a tough loss, against a good Georgia Tech team, I think that Georgia Tech team, honestly, does have just Duke and UNC's number. I mean, it happens in college basketball. So you're not going to win every game, and that was UNC's first conference loss. And I think this is a great bounce back spot for them at home. So I do like the early lean at -4.5, but I expect that line to potentially go down a little bit. I think, potentially a lot of people are going to be going toward Duke just because, oh, that's such a large spread. So, maybe they'll go a little bit of line movement. Hopefully that goes in our favor. So maybe that line goes down to maybe 3.5 or 3. But now we're going to get into the final game of the night, obviously, in the triple header between Tennessee and Kentucky. And that is almost essentially a pick 'em. In fact, it is a pick 'em. We have Tennessee and Kentucky a straight pick 'em right now, with the total at 161.5, with same pick 'em in terms of the over and under. Right now, in terms of the spread, we have Kentucky as a slight home dog at +1.5 and -120. But when we look at that money line and it's pretty even, we know it's a pick 'em. But Ari, we look at this line here. So we look at this line here. Obviously, Tennessee, Kentucky. We talk about this was the third game of the triple header. We talk about Tennessee and how Dalton Knecht has led that Tennessee team in terms of their offense, and in terms of their defense. We talk about how Tennessee defense travels in this spot, and Tennessee's defense is one of the better defenses in the SEC, and they will have they will be tested against one of the best offenses in the country, especially on the road in Kentucky. Ari, we see in this early line, it's pretty much a pick 'em in terms of the over under as well. Is there anything you like? Because it's pretty much a coin flip right now on who's going to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, both teams are coming off losses. My initial kind of thought is that seems like a super high over under. Like I get Kentucky's a super fast paced team, but like you said, Tennessee, has one of the best defenses in the country, and they've been, kind of in a lot of, lower scoring games this year. I mean, they had the one game against Alabama that went, I think it went right over this line. But even that game barely went over this line. Obviously it's in Kentucky, so we talk about home court and how much that matters. And I think with that, Tennessee being a small favorite to open is a lot of respect to them, being on the road, at Kentucky and still being the small favorite. So my initial lean here, kind of favoring Tennessee is the under, because I think if they control the pace, then, I think this could, soar under. If you just go basically, if you're someone who bets solely on the line, then you could, then you might take the over because of how high it is. But my initial kind of thought, favoring being someone who kind of leans to Tennessee winning this game would be the under 161.5. Kind of, that being a more confident play than a side here would be the under.
I kind of agree with you there. I feel like in this kind of game, I feel like 161 is really high, especially we talk about how Tennessee's defense really hunker down. They really shut you down defensively. And then often on the offensive side of the board, they do have, the prowess, to really rack up the score. And, that's why I like the under, but at the same time, I feel like, Kentucky's defense is not the greatest. We've seen, teams pile up points, whether it's at home or on the road against this Kentucky team. And, in that case, I kind of just like Tennessee, whether it's whether it's to cover that spread or even the money line. In that case, I just kind of lean Tennessee just because of the fact that even though we know how Rupp Arena is a tough place to play, and this is going to be the biggest game pretty much I'd say of the day, one of the biggest games of the day, obviously. And, we talk about that total being a little high, so I like the under as well. But I lean Tennessee in this spot. And because of the fact, we just talked about how their defense, really hunkered down, and, their offense connect and then just how it flows as well on top of that, how it just develops into something more and more. Tennessee, one of the better teams in the country. I think they're going to be a sneaky Final Four team if they're playing like this, in terms of how offensively they're really connecting right now with Vescovi as well. So give me Tennessee right now. I do like that spread, but I do think that spread is going to change right now as well, especially in the money line. But I do agree with Ari. I think my final lean would probably be the under. I think that total is a little too high. I think Tennessee's defense will do enough, but I just don't know if Kentucky's defense will do enough as well, just because of the fact that, they rely so much more on their offense. But, we'll have all of these picks, obviously finalized tonight, as we get more official certified lines for all of these games. And we're going to having our picks for tomorrow's huge slate posted sometime tonight on our Twitter down below AKP Sports Talk. But we're going to wrap this episode up. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. That is Ari. I'm Korea. Once again, you can find our full card for today and tomorrow's big college basketball slate on our Twitter. And we'll be back on Monday for another episode of AKP Sports Talk as we wrap up the weekend and get ready for Super Bowl Sunday, which I'm dreading. I just don't want to. You know what? We're going to have fun with it. We may even make a little parlay or something just to kind of distract ourselves that it's the Niners and Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But that's going to be it for this episode. That's Ari. I'm Korea. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you guys on Monday.